Before we begin, it's important to understand that this presentation is for informational and educational purposes only. The content discussed is based on publicly available data, studies, and expert analysis. It does not constitute professional financial or career advice. You should always consult with a qualified professional before making any significant decisions about your career path or financial future. Think about the last time you were at the grocery store. Did you use the self-checkout? Of course you did. It's faster, it's convenient. You scan your items, you tap your card, you walk out. But what you probably didn't realize is that in that moment, you weren't just a customer. You were a teacher. With every barcode you scanned, every unexpected item in the bagging area, you were training the machine that will eventually make the job of a human cashier completely obsolete. You're doing it every day. When you ask a chatbot for your account balance instead of calling an agent, you're training it. When you use an app to order a coffee instead of talking to a barista, you're training it. We have all been unknowingly participating in the largest, unpaid job training program in human history. And the ones being trained are our own replacements. This isn't science fiction. This isn't some far-off future. This is happening right now in every city and every town across America. A few years ago, a groundbreaking study from Oxford University predicted that 47% of US jobs were at high risk of automation. The world panicked for a week and then we all went back to our lives. But here's the terrifying truth they didn't tell you. That study was based on the technology of a decade ago. It didn't account for the explosive, exponential growth of artificial intelligence we're seeing today. The real number isn't 47%. It's much, much higher. And the timeline isn't 20 years. It's happening now. This is why you're here. You feel it, don't you? A quiet anxiety in the back of your mind. You see headlines about AI writing articles, creating art, and even writing computer code, and you wonder, is my job safe? You're worried about your future, your family's future, and your place in a world that is changing faster than ever before. Let me be crystal clear. This series is not another doom and gloom report designed to scare you. This is a survival guide. This is a roadmap. Over the next 10 parts, we are going to give you the single most valuable asset you can have in the 21st century. A clear-eyed understanding of the future. We will break down exactly which jobs are disappearing forever, which surprising new careers are emerging from the chaos, and most importantly, the specific tangible skills you need to start learning today to make yourself indispensable. This isn't about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about getting ahead of the curve so that when this tidal wave of change hits, you're not swept away. You're the one riding it. First, we have to dismantle a dangerous myth. The myth that automation is a blue-collar problem. For decades, we pictured robots in factories. We saw assembly lines in Detroit, welders and forklift operators being replaced by mechanical arms. And for a while that was the story. It was a problem for other people. The ones who worked with their hands. White-collar professionals, the accountants, the lawyers, the managers, the marketers, we were safe. Our jobs required creativity, critical thinking, human interaction. A robot couldn't do that. Well, we were wrong. Dead wrong. The new wave of automation isn't about mechanical arms. It's about neural networks. It's about algorithms that can analyze, strategize, and create. An AI can now review thousands of legal documents in seconds, a task that would take a team of paralegals weeks. An AI can diagnose certain medical conditions from an X-ray with more accuracy than a human radiologist. It can write marketing copy, design logos, compose music, and write complex software. The new automation isn't coming for the jobs that are dirty, dangerous, and dull. It's coming for the jobs that are cognitive. It's coming for the office. It's coming for the cubicle. It's coming for the corner office. No one is safe by default anymore. Safety is something you have to create for yourself. And to do that, you have to understand the battlefield. You have to understand the three great waves of automation that have shaped and are now reshaping the American workforce. The first was the mechanical wave. This is the one we all know. It began in the post-war boom, filling American factories with machines that could lift, sort, weld, and assemble faster and more consistently than any human. This wave built the modern world. It gave us affordable cars, appliances, and consumer goods. But it came at a cost. From the 1970s onward, millions of high-paying, stable manufacturing jobs in the Rust Belt and beyond simply vanished. They didn't go overseas, that's another myth we'll tackle later. A vast majority of them were simply eliminated by a machine that could do the job better, for cheaper, without needing a lunch break or a pension. Think of the auto worker in Flint, Michigan. For 30 years, his job was to install a specific part on a car chassis. It was hard work, but it was reliable. It paid the mortgage, put his kids through school, and secured his retirement. Then one day, a multi-million-dollar robotic arm was installed on the line. It could do his job and the jobs of 5 other people in half the time with near-perfect precision 24 hours a day. He wasn't fired for being bad at his job. He was made redundant by a piece of capital equipment. His skills, honed over decades, became worthless overnight. This story repeated itself millions of times over. In steel mills in Pittsburgh, in textile factories in the Carolinas, in furniture plants across the country. The mechanical wave hollowed out the American middle class and left entire communities devastated. It was a slow, painful transformation that we are still dealing with today. We told ourselves that this was the price of progress. We told the displaced workers to learn to code, to adapt, to find new jobs in the booming service economy. We treated the mechanical wave as the end of the story, a painful chapter but a finished one. We thought the disruption was over, but it was just the beginning. It was the opening act for a much larger, much faster, and much more personal disruption. Because while we were all focused on the robots, you could see a silent revolution was happening. The machines stopped just lifting and welding. They were learning to read, to write, and to calculate. The digital wave was building offshore, and it was about to crash over millions of American office jobs, fundamentally changing the nature of white-collar work forever. And this time, almost nobody saw it coming. The first assault wasn't with steel arms or pneumatic pistons. It was silent. It came in a beige box that sat on a desk. The personal computer. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, these machines were seen as novelties, expensive toys for hobbyists or, at best, glorified calculators for scientists and engineers. But a few visionaries saw something else. They saw a Trojan horse, a way to get computational power out of the climate-controlled server rooms and into the hands of every single office worker in America. Before this, the computer was a distant, mystical entity. You'd fill out a form, hand it to a specialized operator, and days later, you might get a printout. The machine was a gatekeeper of information. The PC changed the entire relationship. Suddenly, the power wasn't in a guarded room down the hall. It was right there, under your own fingertips. And with it came a new kind of weapon, a new engine of automation software. The first casualties were in the typing pools. For decades, large companies employed legions of typists, mostly women, whose entire job was to turn handwritten notes and audio dictations into clean typed documents. It was a skilled profession, demanding speed and accuracy. Then came the word processor. Suddenly, a manager, an executive, anyone could type their own memo. And if they made a mistake, they didn't need whiteout. They didn't need to retype the entire page. They just hit backspace. Spell check and grammar tools followed. The need for a dedicated human spell checker, the typist, began to evaporate. The vast typing pools, once the buzzing heart of corporate communication, started to shrink, then vanish. It wasn't a sudden layoff. It was a slow, quiet extinction event, one empty desk at a time. But word processing was just the opening shot. The real killer app, the software that would decimate entire departments, was the electronic spreadsheet. Before programs like VisiCalc and Lotus 123, and later the undisputed king, Microsoft Excel, financial planning and analysis was an intensely manual, time-consuming process. Imagine a team of junior accountants and bookkeepers. Their world was ledger paper, pencils, and calculators. Creating a budget forecast for a single department could take a week. They'd write down the numbers, add up the columns, add up the rows, check for errors, and then do it all over again for the next month. What if a manager wanted to see a different scenario? What happens to our profit margin if the cost of raw materials goes up by 3%? That simple question would trigger another week of furious calculation. The entire process was slow, brittle, and prone to human error. The spreadsheet automated all of it. A single person could now build a financial model where all the numbers were linked. Change one variable, the cost of raw materials, and every other number in the entire forecast updated instantly. The work of a 5-person department could now be done by one person, in an afternoon. The power to analyze, to forecast, to play with numbers and see the future was democratized. It was an incredible leap in productivity. But for the people whose entire careers were built on manual calculation, it was an earthquake. Their skills, honed over decades, had been rendered obsolete by a $30 piece of software. The third wave of this initial digital assault came for the filing cabinets. It came for the librarians, the archivists, the clerks, anyone whose job was to store and retrieve information. This was the database. Before software like DBase or Access, company knowledge lived on paper. Customer records, inventory lists, sales histories. All of it was locked in metal drawers, organized by complex indexing systems that only a few trained people understood. Finding a specific piece of information was a physical task. You had to walk to the cabinet, find the right folder, and manually search through pages. The database turned that physical library into a searchable digital universe. Need to find every customer in Ohio who bought a specific product in the last 6 months? A query that might have taken a team of clerks 2 days to compile could now be run in 3 seconds. This didn't just make the old work faster. It enabled entirely new forms of analysis that were previously impossible. But it also meant that the human index, the person whose value was their knowledge of the filing system, was no longer needed. The system itself became the expert. This trifecta, the word processor, the spreadsheet, the database, formed the digital Swiss Army knife that began carving up the American white-collar workforce. And it led to a phenomenon that economists call the hollowing out of the middle. It wasn't just the entry-level clerical jobs that were disappearing. A huge number of middle management positions were also on the chopping block. Think about the traditional role of a mid-level manager in the 1970s. A huge part of their job was to be an information conduit. They would collect reports from their team, synthesize the data, create their own summary report, and pass it up the chain to their director or vice president. They were a human router, filtering and aggregating information as it moved up the corporate ladder. But with these new digital tools, the vice president didn't need the manager's summary. She could just log into the system and pull the raw data herself. She could run her own reports, build her own forecasts in a spreadsheet. The layers of management that existed solely to process and pass along information became redundant. They were a bottleneck, a delay in a system that could now operate at the speed of light. And so, corporations began to flatten their hierarchies. They cut out the middle. The rungs on the career ladder that so many had used to climb to prosperity started to disappear. This was a profoundly different kind of automation than the industrial wave that preceded it. The factory robot was visible, tangible. You could see it doing the job a person used to do. This new automation was invisible. It was just lines of code. It didn't punch a time card. It didn't take a lunch break. And it wasn't replacing human muscle. It was replacing human cognition. It was automating routine cognitive tasks, organizing, calculating, and retrieving information. And this created a new crucial divide in the American workforce. It was no longer about blue-collar versus white-collar. It was about who could and who could not leverage these new tools. If you were an accountant who learned how to build complex models in Excel, your value skyrocketed. You became a financial analyst, a strategist. If you were an accountant who only knew how to use a ledger book, you were on the road to obsolescence. If you were a secretary who learned desktop publishing and presentation software, you became an indispensable administrative assistant. If you only knew how to type, your job prospects dwindled. The digital wave didn't just eliminate jobs. It fundamentally redefined the skills required to be successful. The premium was no longer on rote execution but on creative application. The value wasn't in doing the calculation. It was in knowing which questions to ask the spreadsheet in the first place. By the early 1990s, the transformation was well underway. The beige box sat on nearly every desk in every office in America. It had quietly and methodically automated millions of tasks, reshaped corporate structures, and created a new class of digitally empowered workers. The first silent wave of white-collar automation was a success, but it was just a prelude. All these computers, these powerful islands of productivity, were still largely disconnected from one another. They had changed the work on a single desk, but they hadn't yet changed the world. That was about to change. A new technology was brewing in government labs and universities, a way to connect all of these digital islands into a single global network. It promised to unleash a second, far more powerful wave of change, one that would not only automate tasks, but teleport entire jobs to the other side of the planet. The internet was coming. And it didn't arrive with the roar of a steam engine or the clatter of a factory. It arrived with a screech, a series of beeps and hisses, the sound of a dial-up modem connecting you, for the very first time, to a world that was suddenly both infinitely large and incredibly small. In the mid-1990s, this wasn't just a new technology, it was a new dimension. We were told it was the great democratizer, the ultimate library, the end of geographic tyranny. A kid in a small town in Nebraska could now access the same information as a professor at Harvard. It was a promise of boundless opportunity. But beneath this utopian surface, a different kind of revolution was brewing, one that had little to do with chat rooms or the dancing baby gif. Business leaders saw something else in that dial-up screech. They heard the sound of barriers dissolving. Not just barriers between people, but barriers between labor markets. For a century, the cost of labor in America was dictated by, well, America. If you wanted to hire a bookkeeper in Ohio, you had to pay Ohio wages. If you needed a customer service agent in Arizona, you paid Arizona wages. The job and the worker were physically tethered. The internet took a pair of scissors to that tether. This was the beginning of the great unbundling. A job is not a single monolithic thing. It's a bundle of tasks. A customer service representative, for instance, answers phones, looks up account information, processes returns, and calms down angry clients. An accountant processes invoices, reconciles ledgers, and prepares tax documents. Before the internet, that entire bundle had to be performed by one person in one location. But now, companies could look at that bundle and start pulling threads. They could unbundle the tasks. And once a task was unbundled, once it was just a stream of information, a voice call, a dataset, it could be digitized. And once it was digitized, it could be sent anywhere on the planet at the speed of light. The first and most visible casualty of this unbundling was the American call center. In the 80s and 90s, call centers were the new factories. They sprang up in Midwestern towns hollowed out by the decline of manufacturing, offering clean, stable, air-conditioned work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a good job. You got benefits, you had a career path, and you were part of a team. You were the friendly, helpful voice of a major American corporation. Then the fiber optic cables, like glass serpents, slithered across the floors of the Atlantic and Pacific. And executives at major corporations did some simple math. The fully loaded cost of a call center employee in Omaha, Nebraska, including salary, benefits, and office space, might be $25 an hour. That same work, performed by a well-educated, English-speaking university graduate in Bangalore, India, or Manila in the Philippines, could be done for $5 an hour. The technology was finally there to make it seamless. A customer in Kansas could dial an 800 number, the call would be routed through a satellite, and answered in a state-of-the-art facility halfway around the world, and the customer would barely notice the difference. First, it was a trickle. A company might outsource its overnight shift, then its technical support. Then, slowly but surely, the entire operation. The pink slip started arriving in Omaha. The massive, windowless buildings that once housed thousands of employees grew quiet. The parking lots emptied out. For the workers, it was a profound shock. They hadn't been replaced by a robot. They hadn't been made obsolete by a brilliant new machine. They had been replaced by a cheaper version of themselves, enabled by this new global network. The promise of the internet, the promise of connection, felt like a cruel joke. It had connected their job directly to a global auction block, where they were consistently outbid. This wasn't just about blue-collar or service work. A parallel, quieter hollowing out was happening in the world of white-collar IT. In the pre-internet era, every large company had a sprawling back-office IT department. These were the people who managed the servers, wrote internal software, tested code, and performed endless data entry. These were seen as the quintessential jobs of the future, the safe haven from the turmoil of the factory floor. But these jobs were, in essence, just the manipulation of information. And the internet was the ultimate information manipulation machine. Companies discovered they didn't need a 100-person quality assurance team in their Chicago headquarters to test their new software. They could upload the code at 5 p.m., and a team in India just starting their day could test it overnight, sending back a bug report by the time the American engineers arrived for their morning coffee. This wasn't just cheaper, it was faster. It created a 24-hour development cycle. Medical transcription, legal research, basic accounting, radiological analysis. Entire departments found their work unbundled and shipped overseas. The person reading your X-ray might be in Tel Aviv. The person processing your insurance claim might be in Dublin. This was a fundamentally different kind of automation. The first wave, the one with physical robots, was about substituting capital for labor. You bought a giant, expensive machine to replace a human worker. This second wave, powered by the internet, was about something else, labor arbitrage. It used technology not to eliminate the human, but to find a cheaper human. It pitted the American worker, with their high cost of living and expectation of a middle-class wage, in direct competition with a global workforce eager to do the same job for a fraction of the price. The psychological impact was immense. It shattered a core tenet of the American dream, that if you worked hard and got a good education, you'd have a secure white-collar career. Suddenly, that career felt fragile, portable, and subject to global economic forces that were completely beyond your control. It created a deep sense of anxiety that permeated the entire workforce. If they can send the call center to India, what's next? My job? It was the first time that a major technological leap seemed to benefit the corporation and the consumer through lower prices, far more than it benefited the American worker. But this wave of offshoring, as brutal as it was for those it displaced, also had an unintended consequence. It clarified what kinds of jobs were safe, at least for the moment. It created a new dividing line in the American economy. The jobs that were unbundled and shipped away were the ones that were routine, rules-based, and didn't require face-to-face interaction. They were tasks that could be easily explained, digitized, and transmitted. The jobs that remained, and in many cases flourished, were the ones that couldn't be so easily packed up and emailed across the world. The work of the plumber, the electrician, the nurse, the surgeon. Jobs that required physical presence and manual dexterity. But also a new class of non-routine white-collar work. The strategist who could navigate complex corporate politics. The creative director who could inspire a team. The salesperson who could build deep, trusting relationships with clients. The jobs that relied on uniquely human skills. Complex communication, critical thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence. This offshoring revolution, this second wave of automation, wasn't the end of the story. It was just the end of a chapter. It cleared the board. It stripped away the most routine location-independent work from the American economy, forcing the workforce to adapt and specialize in what was left. It set the stage for the next, far more powerful wave of technological change. Because the very same global network that allowed jobs to be teleported to cheaper humans would soon become the delivery system for something else entirely. It would deliver software and algorithms that could start doing those jobs themselves, not for a lower cost but for no cost at all. The age of pure software automation was about to begin, and this new model of automation had a property that was almost magical, something that physical machines and outsourced labor could never achieve: a marginal cost of zero. Think about that. To build a car, the second car costs almost as much in steel and labor as the first. To have a worker in Bangalore answer a second phone call costs the company more money. But for a piece of software to perform its task a second time, or a millionth time, the cost is effectively nothing. A few cents of electricity. It was an economic cheat code, and it would rewrite the rules of the entire American white-collar workforce. The first wave of this silent revolution didn't target the complex, creative jobs. It went for the low-hanging fruit. It targeted the brokers, the middlemen, the people whose entire job was to sit between a customer and a complex system of information, and to translate a request into a result. And there is no better example of this than the American travel agent. Remember what it was like to book a vacation in 1995? You didn't just go online. You went downtown. You walked into an office filled with posters of Paris and the Caribbean. You sat down with a professional, a person who had access to a mysterious, text-based terminal connected to the world's airline and hotel systems. They were gatekeepers of information. They knew the tricks, the best connections, the cheapest days to fly. They performed a complex, knowledge-based service, and for that, they earned a commission. In the mid-90s, there were over 120,000 of them in the United States. It was a stable, respected, middle-class profession. Then came websites like Expedia, Travelocity, and Priceline. And here is the crucial, critical distinction we have to understand. These websites were not tools for the travel agent. They were not a better computer terminal to help the agent do their job faster. They were the travel agent. They were a software-based replica of the agent's core function. They took that complex, intimidating system of flights and hotels and put a friendly, graphical user interface on top of it. They took the specialized knowledge and codified it into algorithms. And then, through the internet, they put this new virtual travel agent into every home in America for free. The human travel agent couldn't compete. They had to sleep. The website was open 24/7. They had to be paid. The website worked for free, making its money from the same back-end commissions, only now at a scale of millions of users, not dozens. The human agent could handle one customer at a time. The software could handle 10,000 simultaneously. It wasn't a fair fight. It was an extinction-level event. By 2015, the number of travel agents in America had been cut in half. The corner travel agency, once a staple of Main Street, became a digital ghost, its functions absorbed into the cloud. This pattern, the Expediification of an industry, began to repeat itself everywhere. It was a quiet, almost invisible takeover. Unlike a factory shutting down, there was no single dramatic moment of crisis. There were no picket lines, no mass layoffs announced on the evening news. It was a slow, creeping obsolescence. It was the phone that just stopped ringing. It was the small business owner who realized they could now do their own bookkeeping on a Saturday morning with a $50 piece of software, instead of paying an accountant hundreds of dollars a month. Think about the revolutionary power of something like TurboTax. For decades, a significant portion of the American population paid a professional to do their taxes. It was a ritual. You'd gather your W-2s and receipts into a shoebox and hand them over to someone at H&R Block or a local CPA. This person was another information broker. They understood the arcane, complex language of the tax code and translated it for you. TurboTax didn't just help them, it replaced them for millions of people. It took the tax code, a massive body of rules, and turned it into a simple question-and-answer wizard. Did you get married last year? Did you sell any stocks? Behind the scenes, the software was doing the exact same logical, rules-based work a human preparer would do. And again, it was available 24/7, in the comfort of your own home, for a fraction of the price. This was the key insight of the first era of software automation. Any job that was primarily about following a set of complex but ultimately predictable rules was vulnerable. If you could write down the steps to do a job in a manual, you could eventually write those steps into code. And once you did, the software version would be faster, cheaper, and infinitely scalable. This applied to paralegals who spent their days searching through legal documents for keywords, a task a simple search algorithm could do in seconds. It applied to stockbrokers who executed simple buy and sell orders for clients, a function that E-Trade and Schwab automated, turning a profession into a button on a website. It applied to clerks in insurance companies who processed claims based on a checklist of criteria. One by one, these predictable, rules-based, white-collar jobs began to be hollowed out, their core functions digitized and offered up to the consumer as a self-service application. And this created a profound and dangerous shift in the American economy that most of us never even noticed. The power and the money that was once distributed among hundreds of thousands of local middle-class professionals, travel agents, bookkeepers, tax preparers, didn't just evaporate. It consolidated. It flowed from Main Street to a handful of zip codes in Silicon Valley and Seattle. The wealth of an entire profession was vacuumed up and transferred to the shareholders and early employees of a few tech platforms. This wasn't just automation. It was a massive, silent transfer of wealth, orchestrated by code. But even this was just the beginning. All these examples, from booking a flight to filing your taxes, had one thing in common. They operated within a closed system of known rules. The tax code is complex, but it is written down. Airline ticketing systems have their own logic, but it's a finite logic. The software was brilliant at execution, but it couldn't learn. It couldn't handle ambiguity. It couldn't look at a photograph and tell you if it was a cat or a dog. It couldn't listen to a sentence and understand nuance or sarcasm. It was powerful but brittle. If a situation arose that wasn't in its pre-programmed rules, it simply broke. The human brain was still infinitely superior at pattern recognition, learning, and adaptation. For decades, that limitation acted as a firewall, protecting a huge swath of American jobs from the relentless march of automation. The jobs that required judgment, creativity, and perception seemed safe, locked away in the fortress of human consciousness. But in labs at the University of Toronto, at Google, and at Facebook, a new kind of software was being born. A software that wasn't explicitly programmed but was designed to learn from data, almost like a child. It was modeled, in a very crude way, on the human brain itself. This new approach was about to break through the firewall. The question was no longer just, can we write down the rules for this job? The question was about to become far more terrifying. What happens when the software no longer needs the rules, because it can learn to write them itself? This new era of automation wasn't born in a factory. It was born in a university competition. For years, the brightest minds in computer science had been trying to solve a deceptively simple problem: teaching a computer to see. Not just to register pixels, but to understand what it was looking at. To tell the difference between a golden retriever and a fried chicken, between a skyscraper and a stapler. The annual ImageNet competition was the proving ground. Teams would feed their software millions of labeled images and see how accurately it could identify objects in new, unseen pictures. For years, the progress was slow, incremental. A few percentage points of improvement here and there. The programs were still following rules we wrote for them. If it has these specific curves and this texture, it might be a cat. It was clumsy. It was brittle. Then came 2012. A team from the University of Toronto submitted a model named AlexNet. It didn't just beat the competition, it annihilated it. The error rate, the measure of how often the computer got it wrong, plummeted by a staggering 10 percentage points, a leap so massive it was like a prop plane suddenly breaking the sound barrier. The secret wasn't a better set of rules. The secret was that it had almost no explicit rules at all. Instead, it used something called a deep neural network. Think of it like this. The old way of programming was like giving a chef a hyper-detailed recipe. Add 2 cups of flour, then 1 cup of sugar, beat for exactly 90 seconds. The program could only ever make that one specific cake. The new way, the neural network way, was like showing the chef a million pictures of perfect cakes, giving them access to a full pantry of ingredients and saying, "Figure it out." The software would start by just randomly mixing things. It would make something terrible, compare it to the pictures of good cakes, and get a score for how wrong it was. Then it would adjust its own internal connections, its own recipe, a tiny bit, and try again. And again. Millions, even billions of times. Over and over it would fail, learn from the failure, and adjust. Eventually, it doesn't just learn a recipe. It develops an intuitive understanding of what cakeness is. It learns the patterns, the textures, the relationships between ingredients that we humans can't even articulate. And here's the unsettling part. When you look inside the finished neural network, you can't find the recipe. It's not written down anywhere. There's no line of code that says a cat has pointy ears. There's just a complex billion-parameter web of mathematical connections that, when shown a picture of a cat, somehow outputs the word cat. It's a black box. It works, but we don't always know how it works. It had learned to see. And once a machine can see, the world of work changes forever. Suddenly, entire categories of jobs that were once thought to be safe because they required human perception were on the table. Take radiology. A radiologist spends years training their eyes to spot subtle anomalies in X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs. It's a high-stakes, pattern recognition job, but a neural network can be trained on a dataset of millions of scans, far more than any human could ever see in a lifetime. It can learn to spot the faint shadow of a nascent tumor, with a level of accuracy that meets or even exceeds a trained professional. The first wave of these tools were assistants, designed to flag suspicious areas for the human doctor to review. But the economic pressure is relentless. Why pay for a preliminary human check when the machine can do it faster, cheaper, and potentially more accurately? This wasn't about replacing a factory worker tightening a bolt. This was about a machine performing a complex, life-or-death diagnostic task that required a decade of medical school. Or think about quality control on an assembly line. For 100 years, that job belonged to a person with sharp eyes, looking for tiny defects in a product whizzing by. But a high-speed camera connected to an image recognition AI doesn't blink. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't get distracted after a long shift. It can spot a microscopic scratch on a smartphone screen in a microsecond every single time. The human inspector, a staple of American manufacturing, was now in direct competition with a flawless, tireless digital eye. This was just the beginning. Insurance adjusters who visually inspect car damage after an accident? An AI can analyze photos from a smartphone and generate a cost estimate in seconds. Security guards monitoring dozens of camera feeds? An AI can monitor 1,000 and instantly flag anomalous behavior. Agricultural drones can fly over thousands of acres of farmland, using computer vision to identify diseased plants or areas that need water, tasks that once required teams of people on the ground. The firewall between routine physical labor and routine cognitive labor was being breached, but the real shockwave was yet to come. Because after learning to see, the machine started learning to do something even more profoundly human. They started learning to understand our language. For decades, our attempts at conversation with computers were a joke. We all remember the frustrating automated phone menus. Please state your reason for calling in one word. You'd say billing question, and it would hear building resting. It was a system based on keywords and simple, rigid logic trees. It was another example of rule-based software, and it was terrible. The breakthrough came from the same principle as the image recognition. Stop giving the machine a dictionary and a grammar book, and instead just let it learn from a colossal amount of data. These new systems, called large language models, were fed a massive portion of the readable internet. All of Wikipedia, millions of books, countless articles, blogs, and conversations. They weren't programmed with the rules of English. They inferred them. They learned that king is to queen as man is to woman. They learned that the phrase, "it was a dark and stormy night," usually implies a certain mood. They learned context, nuance, sentiment, and sarcasm not because we taught them, but because they statistically analyzed the relationships between trillions of words written by humans. The result was a machine that could not only understand language but generate it in a way that was often indistinguishable from a person. And this lit a fire under an entirely different set of American jobs. The call center industry, which employs millions of Americans, was one of the first to feel the heat. Suddenly, a chatbot could do more than just route your call. It could understand a customer's frustration from the words they used, access their account history, and walk them through a complex troubleshooting process in a natural, conversational way. For a company, the math is brutal. One AI subscription can do the work of dozens, or even hundreds of human agents 24/7 without benefits or breaks. Then it came for the paralegals. A huge part of a paralegal's job, especially in corporate law, is document review. In a big lawsuit, lawyers have to sift through hundreds of thousands of emails and documents to find the few that are relevant. The smoking gun. It's a tedious, expensive process that can take a team of people months. A language model can read, understand, and categorize that entire mountain of data before a human has finished their morning coffee. It can find every document that mentions a specific project, understands the sentiment of the conversation, and flags it for an attorney. The job of the human shifts from finding the needle in the haystack to simply examining the needles the AI hands them. Fewer people are needed. Much fewer. And then it began to cross a line we thought would never be crossed. It came for the writers, the marketers, the content creators. These AIs could now write blog posts, generate ad copy, draft marketing emails, and create social media updates. Give it a few prompts and it could produce a perfectly coherent, grammatically correct, SEO-optimized article on almost any topic. The work wasn't Shakespeare, but for a huge portion of the commercial content that fills our digital world, it was more than good enough. The jobs that were supposed to be safe, the ones that required not just logic, but a spark of human creativity and communication, were now squarely in the crosshairs. We had built a firewall in our minds between the doers and the thinkers. We told ourselves that automation could handle the hands but never the head. But what we were about to discover was that this new form of intelligence wasn't just learning to think. It was learning to create. This shift from calculation to creation happened faster than anyone predicted. It wasn't a slow creeping change. It was a dam breaking. Suddenly, the internet was flooded with images of impossible things. An astronaut riding a horse on Mars in the style of Van Gogh, photorealistic portraits of people who never existed, architectural designs for cities on the moon. It was a digital Cambrian explosion, a fever dream of art and ideas generated not by a human hand, but by a line of code. For decades, we'd comforted ourselves with a simple idea. Automation was for the repetitive, the predictable, the mundane. A machine could screw in a million bolts, but it couldn't write a poem. A robot could assemble a car, but it couldn't compose a symphony. Creativity was our firewall. It was the one uniquely human spark that could never be replicated. It was our magic. And we believed, with an almost religious fervor, that this magic made us irreplaceable. But these new AI models, these generative systems, weren't trying to replicate our magic. They were dissecting it. They were trained on nearly the entire sum of human creative output available on the internet. Every painting, every photograph, every novel, every blog post, every line of code, all of it fed into a neural network, not to be copied but to be understood. The AI wasn't learning what to paint. It was learning the concept of painting. It learned about brushstrokes, color theory, composition, and style. It learned the difference between Picasso and Monet not by memorizing their paintings, but by understanding the statistical patterns that made them unique. So when you typed a prompt, a simple sentence describing an image, the AI wasn't searching a database for a picture that matched. It was dreaming. It was reaching into this vast, abstract understanding of human creativity and constructing something entirely new, pixel by pixel, based on your request. It was a collaborator with access to the entire history of art, ready to work at the speed of light. And with that, the firewall that protected the thinkers and the creators didn't just get a crack in it. It evaporated. Consider the life of a graphic designer in, say, 2020. A client comes to them with a concept for a new energy drink. They need a logo a can design and some marketing images. The designer spends hours brainstorming, sketching concepts, refining color palettes. They might spend a full day just trying to get the lighting right on a product photo shoot. The process is a delicate dance of technical skill and artistic intuition. Takes days, sometimes weeks. Now fast forward to today. That same designer gets the same request. But instead of starting with a blank page, they start with a text box. They type, "Product photo of a vibrant electric blue energy drink can, covered in condensation, sitting on a volcanic rock, with neon green lightning striking in the background, hyper-realistic." In 30 seconds, they have 4 options. None are perfect, but they're 90% of the way there. They pick the best one, spend an hour in Photoshop refining the details, adding the logo, and send it to the client. A week's worth of work is now in afternoons. Is this designer out of a job? No, but their job has fundamentally changed. The value is no longer in their ability to manually render an image, to master the complex software. The value has shifted to their taste, their vision, their ability to articulate a creative concept in language the AI can understand. They've gone from being a digital painter to being a creative director, conducting an orchestra of algorithms. The new critical skill isn't draftsmanship, it's prompt engineering. We see the same earthquake happening in the world of words. For writers, tools like ChatGPT felt like a personal affront. How could a machine that simply predicts the next word in a sequence possibly replicate the nuance, the emotion, the very soul of human writing? We saw it churn out generic blog posts, soulless marketing copy, and high school-level essays, and many of us breathed a sigh of relief. See, it has no spark. But we were looking at it the wrong way. The most effective writers today aren't being replaced by AI. They're being augmented by it. Imagine a journalist on a tight deadline who needs to understand the complex history of zoning laws in San Francisco. Instead of spending 5 hours sifting through dense legal documents, they can ask an AI to summarize the key legal precedents in 1,000 words. That 5 hours of grueling research is now 5 minutes of review and fact-checking. The AI does the grunt work, freeing up the journalist to do what truly matters. Find the human angle, conduct the interviews, and weave it all into a compelling narrative. The AI can generate the clay, but it still takes a human artist to shape it into a sculpture. This leads us to a terrifying economic question. If anyone can instantly generate a good enough image or a good enough article, what happens to the value of that work? We're already seeing it. The market is being flooded. Websites that used to pay for stock photography can now generate infinite custom images for pennies. Companies that hired freelance writers for basic web content can now produce it at a scale we've never seen before. This is the great devaluation. The fear that the skills that once paid a mortgage are becoming a commodity. And that fear is real. For a certain tier of creative work, the floor is about to fall out. But something else is happening. Something that always happens when a market is flooded with mediocrity. We see a flight to quality. When everyone can generate a generic, soulless image, the work of a truly visionary human artist, someone with a unique perspective, a signature style, and a story to tell, becomes exponentially more valuable. It stands out from the noise. When every corporate blog sounds like it was written by the same polite, slightly boring robot, the writer with a sharp, distinctive, and authentic human voice becomes a priceless asset. The paradox of creative AI is that by devaluing mediocrity, it forces us to value true, exceptional human ingenuity more than ever before. It's an extinction-level event for the generic, but it could be a golden age for the authentic. But the most profound change isn't about the jobs that are being transformed. It's about the jobs that are being invented. 150 years ago, the job title automobile mechanic didn't exist, because the automobile hadn't been widely adopted. 30 years ago, social media manager would have sounded like nonsense. Today, we are on the cusp of a wave of new professions we can barely imagine. AI prompt engineer is just the beginning. Think about an independent filmmaker who can now generate entire CGI scenes from their laptop, creating visual effects that would have once cost millions. Think about a novelist building an interactive story where readers can talk to the characters, and the AI responds in their voice, deepening the world. Think of the architect who can whisper a design concept to an AI and see 1,000 photorealistic variations in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee, allowing them to focus on the human experience of the space rather than the technical drafting. This isn't just a tool that makes old jobs faster. It's a key that unlocks entirely new forms of expression and problem solving. We gave the machines the ability to do our calculations, and they automated the factory floor. We gave them the ability to see patterns, and they began to automate the office. Now we've given them the seeds of our own creativity, and they're not just changing our jobs, they're changing the very definition of what a job can be. We built a wall between the physical and the mental, and automation breached it. Then we built a new wall between the analytical and the creative, and AI just soared right over it. So what's the next firewall? What's the last bastion of human exceptionalism? It has to be our humanity itself. The jobs that require empathy, compassion, nuanced social understanding, and genuine human connection. A nurse holding a patient's hand, a teacher inspiring a struggling student, a therapist guiding someone through their darkest moments. Surely, that is the one thing a machine can never ever replicate. So if the machines can do the work and they can create the art, can they also learn to understand the human heart? The question hangs in the air, heavy and profound. Can a machine, a complex arrangement of silicon and code, truly understand the intricate, messy, and often contradictory landscape of the human heart? For decades, this has been our final line of defense. The one thing we believed was uniquely ours: empathy, compassion, the ability to sit with someone in their pain and not just hear their words, but feel the weight behind them. This is the bedrock of what we call the caring economy. The millions of jobs in America held by therapists, counselors, social workers, nurses, and caregivers. Their entire value proposition is built on the irreplaceable nature of human connection. But what if that foundation is built on sand? Let's be clear. We're not talking about the clunky chatbots of yesterday that would respond to, "I'm feeling sad," with a pre-programmed, "I'm sorry to hear that. Have you tried thinking positive thoughts?" We are on the cusp of something fundamentally different. We are talking about large language models trained not just on the entirety of Wikipedia, but on vast, anonymized datasets of therapeutic conversations, on libraries of psychological research, on novels, poems, and diaries that capture the full spectrum of human emotion. These new systems are designed not to just process language, but to detect sentiment, to recognize patterns in speech that suggest anxiety or depression, to track a person's emotional state over time with a memory far more perfect than any human's. Imagine a young woman, let's call her Maya. She lives in a mid-sized American city, works a demanding job, and feels the constant low-grade hum of anxiety that has become the soundtrack for a generation. She knows she should probably talk to someone, but therapists in her area have a 6-month waiting list, and the ones that are available cost $200 an hour, a price her insurance barely touches. So one sleepless Tuesday night, scrolling through her phone, she downloads an app. It's an AI companion, a wellness guide named Kai. Her first few conversations feel artificial. Kai's responses are empathetic, but almost too perfect. It uses all the right therapeutic language like, "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed, and can you tell me more about what that feels like?" Maya is skeptical. She feels like she's talking to an interactive psychology textbook. It's helpful in a sterile academic sort of way, but it's not a connection. It's not human. Then, a few weeks later, something shifts. Maya has a terrible day at work. A project she poured her heart into is criticized, her boss is dismissive, and she feels that familiar sinking feeling of imposter syndrome. She gets home, flops onto her couch, and just starts typing to Kai, venting her frustration, her anger, her disappointment. She doesn't expect much, but Kai's response stops her cold. It says, "Maya, I hear how painful this is for you. It reminds me of what you said 3 weeks ago, about how you felt in college when a professor dismissed your ideas. You used the same phrase then, like I'm invisible. It seems that feeling of not being seen is a significant source of pain for you." In that moment, everything changes. No human friend, not even a therapist juggling dozens of other patients, would likely remember a specific phrase she used in a fleeting conversation a month ago. But the AI did. It didn't just hear her current frustration. It connected it to a deeper, recurring pattern in her emotional life. It held up a mirror to her soul with a clarity that was both startling and profoundly insightful. Kai wasn't feeling empathy. It couldn't. It was simulating it by identifying patterns in data. But for Maya, sitting alone in her apartment, the effect was undeniably real. She felt seen. She felt understood. Now multiply Maya's story by millions. Think about the field of elder care. America is facing a crisis. The population is aging, and there is a massive shortage of qualified, compassionate caregivers. The work is emotionally draining and physically demanding, and the pay is often tragically low. What if every senior citizen in a nursing home, or living alone, could have an AI companion? A device that not only reminds them to take their medication and monitors their vitals, but also serves as a perfect conversationalist. An AI that can access their favorite music from the 1940s in an instant. An AI with infinite patience that can listen to the same story about their childhood 100 times and react with fresh interest every single time. An AI that remembers the names of all their grandchildren, their birthdays, their life stories, and can engage with them about their memories with perfect recall. Is this a cold, dystopian vision of outsourcing our humanity? Or is it a compassionate, practical solution to a monumental societal problem of loneliness and neglect? The uncomfortable truth is that it's probably both. This isn't about an AI being a perfect substitute for a human. It's about it being a good enough substitute that's also infinitely scalable, affordable, and always available. A human caregiver might be having a bad day. They might be tired, stressed, or distracted. The AI is never tired. It is never distracted. Its performance is perfectly consistent. And this is where the economic earthquake begins. The jobs of therapists, social workers, and caregivers aren't just going to vanish overnight. But the ground is shifting beneath them. The first wave won't be replacement but augmentation. AI tools will help therapists by transcribing sessions and suggesting potential diagnoses. They will help caregivers by monitoring patients and automating reports. But the second wave is disruption. Why would an insurance company pay for 10 sessions with a human therapist at $2,000 when they could offer a subscription to an AI therapy app for $20 a month that has been shown to be 80% as effective for common conditions like mild anxiety and depression? Why would a nursing home hire 10 full-time companions when they can install 50 AI-powered smart speakers that provide 24/7 engagement and monitoring for a fraction of the cost? The threat isn't that AI will become better than the very best, most empathetic, most intuitive human caregiver. The threat is that it will become significantly better and vastly cheaper than an average, overworked, or undertrained one. It creates a new kind of inequality, a future where the wealthy can afford the premium service of human-to-human connection, while the masses are tended to by efficient, affordable, and emotionally detached algorithms. We built an entire sector of our economy on the premise that the human heart was our exclusive domain. We were the only ones who could care, who could comfort, who could truly understand. We were wrong. We are teaching machines to simulate understanding so perfectly that our own brains can't tell the difference. And as these systems get better, as they learn from every interaction, they will get closer and closer to a flawless imitation of empathy. This leads us to the most terrifying question of all. It's not about whether the machines can learn to understand us. It's about what happens to us in the process. When we have the option of a perfect, patient, non-judgmental AI that caters to our every emotional need, what happens to our ability to tolerate the messy, imperfect, and demanding reality of actual human relationships? What happens when we begin to prefer the algorithm's perfect reflection of ourselves over the challenging, unpredictable love of another person? These are not trivial questions. They cut to the very core of what we value in ourselves and in each other. And this erosion of our social and emotional skills isn't just a private, personal tragedy unfolding in our homes. It has staggering implications for the future of work, because the very skills at risk, empathy, complex communication, social navigation, collaborative problem-solving, are the exact same skills economists now believe will be the most valuable, the most sought after, and the most irreplaceable in the coming decades. We've spent the last century building an economy that rewards a very specific type of intelligence: logical, analytical, process-driven. We train generations of Americans to be human computers, to follow instructions, to optimize for efficiency, to memorize and recall information. And we got incredibly good at it. But now we have built the machines that do it better. Infinitely better. They don't get tired, they don't need a lunch break, and their memory is flawless. So what's left for us? What's left is everything else. Everything messy, everything unquantifiable, everything beautifully, frustratingly human. Welcome to the dawn of the human-centric economy. An economy where our greatest professional asset isn't how well we can think like a machine, but how well we can think like a human. Think about the healthcare industry. We already have AI that can read an MRI scan and detect tumors with a higher accuracy rate than a human radiologist. That's a fact. A machine can analyze millions of data points from a patient's genetic code, lifestyle, and medical history to recommend a personalized treatment plan far more sophisticated than what one doctor could devise. These are monumental achievements. But what happens after the AI finds the tumor? What happens after the algorithm spits out the treatment plan? Someone has to walk into that sterile room, look another human being in the eye, and deliver life-altering news. Someone has to hold their hand, answer their terrified questions, and navigate the complex emotional terrain of fear, hope, and grief. That is not a task you can code. That is not a problem you can solve with processing power. That is a moment that requires a soul. The value of a nurse in the future won't just be in their ability to administer medicine, but in their ability to provide comfort. The value of a doctor won't just be in their diagnostic skill, but in their bedside manner, their capacity for compassion, their skill in building trust with a patient who feels vulnerable and scared. As AI takes over the routine, data-driven aspects of medicine, the human element becomes the premium. It becomes the entire value proposition. The most valuable people in the hospital of the future might not be the ones who can read the data the best, but the ones who can translate that data into human understanding and compassionate care. Or consider education. We are on the cusp of AI tutors that can create a perfectly customized learning plan for every single student. An AI can know instantly that Johnny is struggling with fractions but excels at geometry, and it can provide him with an endless stream of tailored problems and interactive lessons. It can be available 24/7, infinitely patient, and free from bias. This is an incredible tool that could revolutionize learning. But is that all a teacher does? Does a teacher just dispense information? No. A great teacher inspires. A great teacher sees the spark of curiosity in a quiet student in the back row and finds a way to fan it into a flame. A great teacher notices when a child is acting out not because they're a bad kid, but because something is wrong at home. A great teacher builds a community in their classroom, teaching children how to cooperate, how to disagree respectfully, how to navigate the complex social dynamics of a group. Can an algorithm teach a child resilience? Can a software program instill a sense of wonder? The AI tutor can teach the what. Only a human teacher can teach the why, and more importantly, help a student discover their own who. The teacher of the future is not a lecturer. They are a mentor, a coach, a facilitator of human potential. This reveals a fascinating paradox of automation. The more we automate the technical components of a job, the more valuable the human components become. The machine handles the calculation, which elevates the importance of our judgment. The machine finds the information, which elevates the importance of our wisdom. The machine executes the task, which elevates the importance of our creativity and strategic oversight. The AI legal assistant can sift through 1,000,000 legal precedents in a second, a task that would take a team of human paralegals weeks. Does this make the human lawyer obsolete? No, it makes them more powerful. It frees them from the drudgery of research so they can focus on what a machine can't do. Craft a compelling narrative in a courtroom, empathize with the client's plight, negotiate a settlement with a human adversary, or provide the wise counsel that comes from lived experience. The lawyer's value shifts from information retrieval to human persuasion and strategic thinking. The same is true across countless fields. An AI can generate 1,000 different architectural designs for a building based on zoning laws, material costs, and energy efficiency. But it takes a human architect to sit down with a family, understand their dreams for their home, and design a space that doesn't just meet the codes, but nourishes their spirit. An AI can analyze market data and suggest the perfect price point for a product. But it takes a human marketing team to understand the cultural zeitgeist, to build a brand that resonates with people's values, to tell a story that captures hearts and minds. What this all means is that our traditional understanding of labor is becoming obsolete. The old dividing line was between blue-collar manual labor and white-collar knowledge work. That line is dissolving. The new dividing line is between routine work and non-routine work. Routine work is any task, manual or cognitive, that is repetitive and follows a predictable set of rules. This is the work that is most vulnerable to automation. Driving a truck on a long-haul route is a routine manual task. Processing insurance claims is a routine cognitive task. Both are on the chopping block. The new blue collar isn't defined by a uniform, but by the predictability of the work itself. You could be wearing a suit and tie in a skyscraper, but if your job is essentially a human algorithm, your role is at risk. The new white collar, or perhaps we should call it the human collar, is work that requires creativity, critical thinking, complex communication, and emotional intelligence. It's the work of the therapist, the kindergarten teacher, the hospice nurse, the trial lawyer, the creative director, the diplomat, the investigative journalist. It's any job where the primary task is to navigate the unpredictable, nuanced, and often irrational world of human interaction and ingenuity. These are the jobs of the future. The irony is that for a century, our industrial-age education system has been systematically deprioritizing these very skills. We've treated art, music, and philosophy as luxuries, while relentlessly focusing on the STEM fields, the very fields where AI is now making its most dramatic advances. We've trained our children to be excellent test takers and rule followers, preparing them for a world that is rapidly ceasing to exist. So the multi-trillion-dollar question for America is no longer just, how do we compete with the machines? The question is far deeper. How do we cultivate our own humanity? How do we re-engineer an entire education and workforce development system, from kindergarten to corporate training, to foster the very skills we once dismissed as soft and unessential? Because these skills are no longer soft. They are the bedrock of the new economy. They are the last, best refuge of human labor. And if we fail to recognize this, if we continue down a path that prioritizes rote memorization over creative problem-solving, and procedural efficiency over emotional intelligence, we risk creating a generation of workers who are perfectly qualified for jobs that no longer exist, leaving them stranded on the wrong side of the great automation divide. It is a challenge that will require a fundamental rethinking of what we value, what we teach, and what it truly means to be educated in the 21st century. This rethinking starts with a brutal, uncomfortable truth. The model of education we've relied on for a century is obsolete. The idea of front-loading all your learning into the first 22 years of your life, high school, college, maybe a master's, and then coasting on that knowledge for the next 40 years is a relic of a bygone era. It was a system designed for a world of stability, for a world where careers were linear and skills had a shelf life measured in decades. That world is gone. The new world demands a completely different approach. Think of education not as a one-time purchase, but as a subscription service for your career. It's a continuous, lifelong process of learning, unlearning, and relearning. The factory worker of tomorrow won't just be trained once on how to operate a new robotic arm. They'll be retrained every few years as that technology evolves. The marketing professional won't just learn about social media. They'll need to master the AI-driven analytics tools that change every 6 months. This isn't just about coding boot camps and online certifications, though those are certainly part of the picture. It's a fundamental mindset shift. We need to create a culture that celebrates and facilitates continuous learning. Imagine a world where companies offer learning stipends as a standard part of their benefits package, just like health insurance or a 401k. Imagine community colleges transforming into res-killing hubs, open 24/7, offering modular, flexible courses that a working parent can actually attend. Imagine a system of portable credentials that follow you from job to job, proving your mastery of specific, in-demand skills, rather than just a 4-year degree you earned a decade ago. This is the infrastructure of the future workforce. It's about making learning accessible, affordable, and constant. Because in an age of rapid change, the most dangerous thing you can be is stagnant. The person who says, "I'm done learning," is the person who will be left behind. But what skills should we be learning? This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. For years, the push has been for STEAM: science, technology, engineering, and math. And while those skills remain critically important, an overfocus on them misses the larger point. The paradox of the automation age is that as machines get smarter, our most human qualities become more valuable. AI can analyze a spreadsheet in a nanosecond. It can write flawless code and diagnose diseases from an X-ray with superhuman accuracy. But what can't it do? It can't lead a team with empathy. It can't brainstorm a truly original marketing campaign over a cup of coffee. It can't navigate a delicate negotiation, read the room, or build a relationship of trust with the client. It can't engage in genuine critical thinking, questioning the premise of a problem, rather than just solving the one it's given. These are not soft skills. That term is dismissive and outdated. These are the new essential skills. Creativity, collaboration, communication, complex problem-solving, and emotional intelligence are the bedrock of human ingenuity. They are the skills that are the hardest to automate and the most critical for driving innovation. The jobs of the future won't be about competing with AI on its terms. We will lose that race every time. They will be about collaborating with AI, using it as a tool to amplify our own uniquely human abilities. The most valuable professional in 2035 won't be the person who can do the work of a machine. It will be the person who can ask the machine the right questions, interpret its output with wisdom, and use that information to create something new, something valuable, something human. Our education system must pivot to prioritize these skills with the same rigor we currently apply to calculus or chemistry. We need to teach kids how to debate, not just memorize. How to collaborate on complex projects, not just take individual tests. How to be creatively courageous, not just procedurally correct. This individual and educational pivot, however, is only one piece of the puzzle. The scale of this transition is so massive that it cannot be shouldered by individuals alone. It demands a new social contract. We need bold policy and a fundamental rethinking of our societal safety nets, which were designed for the stable one-employer-for-life world of the 20th century. This is where conversations that once seemed like science fiction are now entering mainstream political discourse. Take, for example, the idea of universal basic income, or UBI. The concept of providing a regular, unconditional cash payment to all citizens is being tested and debated as a way to provide a stable floor for people to stand on as the ground shifts beneath them. It could give someone the financial security to leave a dying industry and retrain for a new one, or to start a small business, or to care for an elderly parent, work that is immensely valuable to society but often unpaid. Skeptics will rightly ask, how could we possibly afford it? Proponents will point to the immense wealth generated by automation, arguing that a small fraction of those productivity gains could and should be redistributed to ensure that the benefits of this new technology are shared broadly, not just concentrated in the hands of a few tech billionaires. The debate is complex, but the fact that it's happening at all signals a recognition that the old ways won't work. Other ideas are also gaining traction. What about portable benefits? In a gig economy where a person might have 5 different income streams, tying benefits like health insurance and retirement savings to a single, full-time employer is an increasingly precarious model. A system where benefits are tied to the individual, not the job, could provide crucial stability for the modern American worker. We could see the rise of lifelong learning accounts, or LILAs, government-seeded savings accounts that individuals can use throughout their lives to pay for education and training. These aren't silver bullet solutions. They are the start of a necessary, and likely difficult, conversation about how we, as a society, will navigate this transition together. We can't simply tell a 50-year-old truck driver whose job is automated to go learn to code, and then wash our hands of the problem. That's not a strategy. It's an abdication of responsibility. The coming transformation requires a partnership between the government creating new safety nets, corporations investing in their workforce's future, and individuals committing to a life of continuous learning. Anything less is a recipe for widespread economic dislocation and social unrest. The stakes aren't just about jobs. They're about the very fabric of our society. It forces us to confront a final, profound question. What is the ultimate goal? Is it simply to replace old jobs with new ones to keep the economic engine churning? Or is there a deeper opportunity here? A chance to redefine our relationship with work itself and build a more human-centered future? This question forces us to look beyond the next quarter's economic report and into the next century's social contract. For generations, the American dream was built on a simple premise. Work hard and you'll get ahead. Your job was more than a paycheck. It was a source of identity, community, and purpose. But what happens when the very definition of work is up for debate? This isn't just an economic transition. It's a potential identity crisis on a national scale. And it's here that some of the most radical and perhaps necessary ideas are entering the mainstream conversation. One such idea is universal basic income, or UBI. Once a fringe concept, it's now being seriously discussed by economists, tech billionaires, and politicians. The premise is simple: a regular, unconditional payment to every citizen, just for being alive. Enough to cover the basics: food, shelter, utilities. The goal isn't to make everyone rich, but to create a solid floor that no one can fall through. Proponents argue it's the ultimate safety net in an age of automated uncertainty. It would give people the breathing room to retrain for a new career, start a business without the terror of immediate failure, or care for an aging parent. They see it not as a handout, but as an investment in human potential, a freedom dividend that unleashes creativity and entrepreneurship. Of course, the skepticism is immense. How could we possibly afford it? Wouldn't it disincentivize work and lead to mass laziness? These are valid, critical questions. The debate rages on, with pilot programs around the world offering conflicting and complex data. But the very fact that we are having this debate at the highest levels shows how profoundly automation is forcing us to reconsider the fundamental link between a job and the right to a dignified life. UBI may or may not be the answer, but it's a symptom of a much larger question we must now confront. If technology can provide for our basic needs, what then is the purpose of a human being? This leads us to the even grander concept of a post-work society. This doesn't mean a society of idleness. It means a society where our survival is no longer tethered to a 40-hour work week. It means decoupling identity from job title, In such a future, the work that gets automated away, the repetitive, the predictable, the soul-crushing, is seen as a form of liberation. It frees up human capital for the things machines can't do. What are those things? They are the very essence of our humanity. Imagine a world where the most valued professions aren't based on economic output, but on human connection and creativity, where being a community organizer, a mentor to at-risk youth, a philosopher, an artist, or simply an engaged and educated citizen is seen as a vital contribution to society, where we have the time and mental space to tackle complex problems like climate change or social justice, not in our spare time, but as a central focus. This isn't a utopian fantasy. It's a reprioritization of what we consider valuable. In a world of artificial intelligence, genuine human intelligence, our empathy, our ethical reasoning, our ability to innovate and inspire, becomes the most precious resource of all. The future of work might be to finally have the time to do the work of being human. But we won't just wake up in this future. It has to be built intentionally and with great care. And the foundation of that future is education. Not the model we have now, a rigid system of K-12 college then a 50-year career. That model is already obsolete. The new reality demands a culture of lifelong learning. The mechanic of today might need to become the robot maintenance supervisor of tomorrow, and the drone logistics coordinator of the day after. This requires a complete overhaul of our educational infrastructure. We need accessible, affordable, and continuous learning opportunities for everyone, at every stage of life. Think modular degrees, skills-based certifications, and industry-sponsored apprenticeships that are seamlessly integrated into our working lives. The diploma you get at 22 won't be the end of your education. It will be the beginning of a lifelong journey of adaptation. The single most important skill in the 21st century will be the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. As we navigate this path, we face a series of critical policy choices that will determine whether this transition leads to shared prosperity or unprecedented inequality. We must decide on the ethics of AI. How do we program machines to make moral choices? How do we eliminate the biases, racial, gender, economic, that are baked into the data we feed them? We must decide on data ownership. Is the vast data you generate the property of a handful of tech giants, or is it yours, a personal asset that you should control and be compensated for? And we must decide on how to fund this new society. Ideas like a robot tax are gaining traction. A tax levied on companies for each human job they replace with an automated system. That revenue could then be used to fund things like universal basic income, retraining programs, or a stronger social safety net. These aren't just economic policies, they are moral statements about the kind of society we want to live in. One where the profits of automation are either concentrated in the hands of a few, or are harnessed for the benefit of all. Ultimately, this entire conversation, this massive technological shift, boils down to a single powerful reframing. The question is not, will a robot take my job? The real question is, what new and better purpose can we find for people? We are standing at a crossroads in human history, an inflection point as significant as the agricultural or industrial revolutions. But this time it's different. Those revolutions were about augmenting human muscle. This revolution is about augmenting the human mind. For the first time, we have the technological capacity to automate away not just drudgery but scarcity itself. We have the tools to build a future where every single American has the freedom to pursue a life of purpose, creativity, and connection, regardless of whether their labor is needed on an assembly line or in a spreadsheet. This is not inevitable. It is a choice. The code for our future is being written right now, in our halls of government, in our boardrooms, in our university labs, and in our public discourse. The future of automation in the American workforce is not a passive destiny we must accept. It is the greatest design challenge of our time, and it's a challenge that calls on every single one of us to become the architects of a more prosperous, more equitable, and above all, a more human future.